I'm Amanda Knox, and you're listening to Hard Knocks.
My name is Dessa, and I'm a writer and a musician. So for me, the kind of entry into performance wasn't like in school band or in choir. It was afterwards. I was like a lonely, sad girl kind of vibes in high school, and I ended up joining a rap crew that toured for kind of on and off and in fits and starts for, something like 20 years of my life. Yeah.
I love that. I love how it's not like you were there studying music. You were being like a philosophy girl, and then who just happened to know how to express herself in rap terms. That's an interesting, intersection of talents.
I don't know how your experience has been like as a creative person in the world, but for me, I think I have never been an artist who's like, God, what a great day. You know what I want to do? Pick up a guitar. And in part because I don't play guitar. But even if I did, for me, I think very often like music and art comes out of a feeling of disorientation, distress, conflict. That's the reason for it. If you're having a freaking awesome Wednesday, then you just Wednesday. There's no need, do you know what I mean? Like there's no need to bring out the heavy machinery to figure out what the hell is happening to your human single life. And so I think...
I totally feel that, by the way. So my daughter listens to me play the piano, and I do not like play the piano. I like play chords on the piano and sing along. And she's started to copy me. And the way that she copies me, and I've caught her doing this, is she'll be at the piano just going like plunk, plunk, plunk. And what she's saying is, I'm sad. I'm sad.
Literally? Those are the lyrics? That's the lyric?
Yes, I'm sad, just over and over and over again.
Listen, if she's trying to open up in Seattle sometime, I'm sure we could find a spot on the bill that kind of matches the vibe.
But it's like perfectly crystallized. It's like, what are these songs that I'm writing? And I wish I was the type of person who was just writing fun time songs. I love fun time songs.
I was going to say, as a listener, what do you, not consume, because the song is still there after you've listened to it. But like, right. What do you dig as a listener?
Honestly, fun time songs. I like songs that like pick me up, get me motivated, make me laugh. Those are the types of songs that I love. But the songs that I end up making are the opposite of that. They're like songs that make you cry and make you think. And I don't know how to get out of that. Like, what's your experience with that? Like, what do you like to listen to?
I think that actually, some of that really resonates. I would say that I am interested. I don't have anything super brilliant to say, except that I'm fascinated and confused by the delta sometimes between what artists are moved by in their consumer, whatever you want to call it, in their listener, watcher mode, and the stuff that they make. And, I've tried my hand in recent years at like, I'm going to make let's pretend the word bop is still in circulation. Like, I'm going to make a feel-good song. But I think that for me, a lot of I guess it's radio. Like, the face I'm making is like bass face, like one lip up, eyebrows down, like let's go get it, go team. I think a lot of the times that I like that feeling in music, it's an energetic feeling, it's a motivating feeling, but a lot of times it's positioned in opposition to something. So it's not like, it's a sunny day. Yeah, exactly. We're not shoulder dancing and whistling. Do you know what I mean? It's not Lemonade. Yeah. It's like, I'm going to get through this with like gasoline and lymph. It's like, totally. There's a wall.
I do love a good song like that too. I like one of my go-to songs like that in prison was Après Moi by Regina Spektor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. But also I'm sure you have this conversation with absolutely every guest, but like, how do you, when you say that, like one of the songs that I listened to in prison that I really dug, are you doing that because like, hey, let's just open the seal? Or because like, no, dude, that's just part of my life and I treat it as every other part of my life? Or are you trying to also like give an indication to like, hey, you're meeting strangers all the time who already know you? How do you handle it?
That's a really interesting question. I mean, I think it's more of at this point in my life, it's just a part of my life. And so it's just there on the table for discussion. And I assume you know that I went to prison, so I don't have to like explain it. I do think that if I were in a scenario where potentially the person sitting across from me didn't know that I had gone to prison, I would have that. I would feel like, oh, is this something that I want to potentially bring up? But a weird sort of silver lining benefit to the very public nature of my case was that I just kind of assume that everyone knows that I went to prison. And I honestly think that me bringing it up makes it more comfortable for people so that they don't feel like they have to ask, should we bring it up or not? I'm just like, it's there. Don't worry about it.
Here's the third rail. Don't worry about it.
Yeah,
it's not. Yeah. Because I wondered too about, anybody in air quote, but public life, which is maybe all of us now because we're constantly, I don't know, broadcasting our intimate moments and brunches. But the deliberate manner in which we present the public hand puppet of our character, right? Like to maneuver around. And you're aware of how like that hits. You are a public figure. You are maybe uncomfortably like well-rehearsed in trying to figure out like, and here's the version of me to slip over my head like a sweater and present to the crowd, to the camera, etc.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that remains spooky, scary to me about like drinking my own Kool-Aid, because that is when art gets stupid. And
okay, talk to me more about that. Dig into that more for me. So this sounds like this is still something that you're working through. So talk to me about, like, let's tell a story about that. When are you first encountering this sweater version of yourself and becoming aware of it and having thoughts and feelings about it?
Some of this, admittedly, is armchair psychology. So listener, take or leave, or salt. But I would say, like, I remember the first time hearing that a lot of performers. So these are particularly the people who, I want you to like what I do. I want you to look at me and say that. I want you to like me personally, like applause junkies, which isn't everybody, but it's most, I think, in the performing arts. And I remember hearing for the first time that like that appetite for validation, praise, whatever, like a lot of kids, who end up in that world had like some pretty challenging dynamics at home, which might mean big love, it might, as well, but challenging dynamics, particularly with dads. I don't know if that's true. I'd be interested in a study, but I remember thinking, that feels true for me. My dad is awesome, brilliant, loving, had a huge anger problem when I was a kid. And like everybody else on the planet is trying to do what you can with what you got,
Yeah.
But really spooked me, and I loved the heck out of him, wanted to find the good sides, the bright sides, but you also become a really good room reader, right? Dad's having a bad one, like he's going through it right now. Unbeknownst to me, marriage is falling apart, whatever, he's doing night school, the whole adult thing, right? Ups and downs. But I remember being attuned to that would be a really valuable skill, even when you're knee-high. And so later, when I became an artist, I think one of my strengths and maybe weaknesses is I'm really good on stage, even if I don't have like the absolute best, like pitch perfect voice or the biggest range of everybody, like I'm really tracking the room. Like I am reading text messages if I can see the screen. You know what I mean? I know what the bartender liked and what he didn't like, and I can see it. Fuck. Excuse me. Can I do that?
Yeah.
Sorry,
this is a podcast.
Ask.
It's the Wild West.
Okay. I was like, fuck. Like I remember the first time I heard it, like a bartender was shaking in time. And I went up to thank him later, and I was like, you have no idea how often I am fighting with whatever mixed cocktail is being done behind the bar. Like, yo, thank you. And that means what I'm not doing is like entirely, closing my eyes and sometimes letting myself be washed over by feeling. Because what I'm trying to do is figure out, like, is there anybody in this room who seems bored? Or even worse, the horror, is there anybody here who doesn't like me?
Yeah.
And part of that's human. I think we all want social regard. But yeah, I think now, 20 years in, a lot of the things that I had tried to shield myself from, thinking I knew better, it's like you swim in the water, that shit's in your blood. And that has to do with like even the vanity of social media. I think It connects people from far away who love the same things, and that's awesome. And I think it's become a pretty serious cesspool of culture in a lot of other ways. That's rewards hot takes at the expense of dignity and kindness. And I've found myself playing the game on offer a lot. Like, I hate the fact that if I were to say, hey, I have a new tour and I share the tour flyer, like, come on out. Like, I know that will get less attention than if I take one photo with my hair down. A photo with my mom and me getting a haircut is like the only way that I know for sure to like win the algorithm, you know?
Yeah. Can I pause and like sort of dig into that a little bit? Because as someone who also performs, I think it's interesting that when you talk about like the metaphor that you used was putting on a sweater or like reading the room. Like I think I agree with you that being a good performer requires that you are in tune with the audience. You're not just up there just doing your thing. Like there's feedback, right? And as a performer, you are sort of, the way I imagine it is like you're tuning up certain parts of yourself and your performance that are pleasing the audience, and you're tuning down things that are not pleasing the audience. And so but the point isn't that you're doing that to yourself necessarily. It's to the product that you are producing in this moment, in this room with this audience. And then you can go back and, you know, once you step off of stage, I mean, there's still a lot of like engagement with the audience even afterwards. But like in the privacy of your own home, you can go back to being an unlikable, grumpy person. But like in the moment, the product that you're producing is a likable, you know, entertaining person. And I think maybe I don't think there's anything wrong with that necessarily, because that's part of the that's part of the deal. Like, people are paying to be in the room, and you are getting paid to be in the room because there's this exchange happening of energy and all of that. So I think that that's interesting. But I think you're right that there is this weird danger of like when. In the same way that like with social media, I think it's a very similar thing. We're tuning up things about ourselves that get engagement. We're tuning down things that don't get engagement. And the line between who this avatar is that you are, what is the product versus the person, becomes a little bit hazy. And I don't know, like, yeah.
And I think you bring back, okay, so I'd say, if I were an artist, because you're right, I think you can, if I'm not Guar, and I'm not like chaperone, you know? So like for me, the thing that interested me about getting into art primarily was creative nonfiction. I think that's a super unsexy name. It's named twice for what it isn't, like, but in short, you know, like it sucks. But artful true stories has been my jam. Sometimes I write some fiction, but for the most part, artful true stories. So for me, it was really important to like keep the bullshit to a minimum. Of course, you can't be exactly the same private version of yourself. I'm not going to go on stage and just babble, you know, trying to write a song in real time. But for me, it was like, be the best true version of yourself. And I think that a lot of us have found that like the kind of shaping that social media does to you doesn't stay just on social media. When you look in your mirror, the ideas that you got from social media are activated because there's no filter in the bathroom medicine cabinet. And you look busted to yourself in a way that nobody looks busted online. And I think also, I mean, to get heavy, so that's the light side. But also it's just like, well, at 19, 20, 21, 22, I was so like moved and excited to be asked to make music with these dudes. It was all dudes who I really admired. Their work
I didn't realize it was all dudes. How intimidating.
I didn't even know it was all dudes. Because unbeknownst to me, like, there was one woman whose name was Emily Bloodmobile. Like, I wrote the bios because that's what I was good at. You know, it's indie hip hop. So everybody's like, I'll learn how to screen print or design. You know, everybody's just kind of it's like a pickup, I don't know, rec center team. And and I was writing the bios, and I was like, gosh, I can't wait to meet Emily Bloodmobile. I knew she lived out of town. It turned out she was just the alter ego of my boyfriend. And I didn't even know that. She was like a producer, you know.
I mean, that's kind of hot. But
I kind of at the time. And so, but now you're, you know, fast forward, you become like an adult. I wasn't thinking like, hey, what does it mean to be like a light-skinned woman in Black art? What does that mean economically? What is posturing? What is like, what lines ought you be, what are the third rails? What ought you be careful of? And even just thinking, you know, in my, like economically, like, oh, so for listeners who, you know, who can't see our faces, I am tall, brown haired, I am white looking, I'm half white and half Puerto Rican, or perhaps in 2025 that's all white as we renegotiate what Latin
depends on
stuff
who,
is.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. I'm not Afro-Caribbean, and answering those questions, of course, like after you're already on the train. So like, okay, when I get a gig that pays good, and sometimes I do like speaking gigs, I don't think that's because the booker is like, I want like the light skin, you know, white girl who also is, you know, I'm good on stage, I'm delightful, whatever. But also they know me because I went to college and you know what I mean? Somebody's friend knew me, as opposed to like some of the dudes in my clique who have really different backgrounds who might not have gone to college. And so they don't meet the people then who later, 15 years in the future, have like good paying gigs. So to be honest, I mean, particularly after 2020, George Floyd, you know, I was in Minneapolis at that time, although I know that touched the whole world, but that was a big like, oh, did I get this entire thing? And I'm wrong. And I think that was true of a lot of America. Like, oh shit, that racism thing that we knew was at play and present was like way bigger than I thought. Oh shit, was I not listening carefully enough to the people like in my life? You know, my partner for the biggest chunk of my life was a Black guy, and that doesn't excuse you from the conversation, man. Like, yeah, and thinking like replaying moments.
Do you feel like you hadn't been a part of the conversation in ways that you should have been?
I feel like I was a part of the conversation. Okay, but like when somebody says, I have a toothache, when you meet them for coffee, and then you keep chatting, you know that they have a toothache. But like that part of the conversation is over for you now. When you actually have a toothache, that is an all-consuming sensation that colors absolutely everything.
Right.
And I think I knew it. I mean, participated in benefits, etc. But like, do you know it? Like the fact that I was surprised at that footage. Not a lot of my Black friends were surprised watching George Floyd die, right? And then, to be honest with you, after that, feeling so... I know hysteria, that word has like a really regrettable etymology. But living in Minneapolis after that and losing it, just like really watching my community lose its shit. Searching in bushes for gasoline cans, like everybody's on signal, and we're trying to figure out what hats the undercover cops are wearing, and also the which is maybe the way of the world, but like I think the progressive community, which I've long been a part of, I don't know, it just kind of goes naturally with the art world. I think a lot of us are like sensitive to the universe and want to do what you can to put your shoulder against like a wheel of change. And I watched us kind of snipe at one another in a way that got really scary, and and weapons and all sorts of stuff. And so I think that was a big education for me, whereas I felt like before George Floyd and COVID, the task was, hey, you know what's right. You got to muster the nerve to act that way. And sometimes you fell short. And then all of a sudden I was like, my moral compass is spun out. I don't know what's happening. And I'm confused by, some of the factions that were trying to find a better way to proceed in Minneapolis. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's super interesting given that you've very deeply studied ethics. And like, how did that help you process what was happening in real time.
I think it gave me names to be able to better express absolute despair. I think
okay.
when you think of like,
Fair.
The anti-racism movement, I remember in its first wave, I don't know what wave we're in. I don't even know if there's waves counting, but in that first, let's all read the books part.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being like, oh, okay, so this is all utilitarian, meaning it doesn't really matter what your intentions were. Like, if you cause somebody pain, wrong, full stop, take accountability, that's it. Whereas a lot of people might want to be like, oh, but I didn't know that, I'm sorry if you got hurt. And I was like, okay, part of me was like, yeah, if pain, harm, racism, like, if it's just hurting everybody way more than as a person who's not subject to it, I thought it was like, heard, it doesn't really matter, dude, what you thought. And then on the other hand, I'm like, my fundamental intuition about morality really does take into account intention. So, for example, like a truism, like, do unto others as you would wish. Like, it's insufficiently developed. It's like knowing not to offer my Muslim neighbors cupcakes during Ramadan. That's just something that just like takes living to figure out. Like, oh, that's not nice, actually. That's kind of a pain in the ass. Like, good intent, don't do it. Okay, keep it moving, And I think right now I'm still figuring out, like, maybe like a lot of America, like, God, what do I think? And I think I've become a lot more afraid to get it, to my discredit. I've been so afraid to get it wrong that I found myself engaging less publicly. I think, which sucks. It feels like the exact opposite. And I intellectually know that, but I'm scared.
You're no longer leaning your shoulder into that wheel of change because you're like, which one?
But also because of self-preservation. Like, yes, and part of, I think, and it might be totally different in your, like, world, but in the world that's made for me of culture, like, by my phone. So it's like the friends of people, the follow, the news I watch, da-da-da. It felt like in our discussion about, like, hey, accountability, and I'm still not sure totally what we all mean by that, but hey, in this discussion of accountability, like, own your shit. If you fucked up, say so. And I was like, okay, heard. And then it was like, also, from other angles perhaps, if you did fuck up in any way, like, we will dox you. And I was like, that is like totally, how would one lean into that, right? If one wants to say, I fucked up, this was closed-minded, or I got habits I got to change. And if to say that publicly is to suffer such enormous consequences that it's hard to imagine somebody being game to have a frank conversation about personal failures. I'm not sure how helpful that is. Sorry, this is so high level, but those are the kind of things that I was thinking of. And from personal experience, like, what did it mean to have had that long relationship with a Black guy? What did it mean to, like, text the Black musicians that I work with? Was that a pain in the ass because all they got to do now is, like, reassure their white collaborators, like, you good, Or am I helping? Like, I think we all learned the word, like, emotional labor at the same time. But as you can hear, just from this constant flood of thought, I think what it means to be a person who isn't Black making rap music warranted a lot more thought. Yeah, I'm sure. Then I jumped in at 20 when I was like, tight, you guys are rule and you want me to record
and
too?
Here's the, yeah, great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and how at 19 are you supposed to be able to have all of the consequences of your actions in mind? I think that it's well understood. Like, it's interesting. My response to a lot of this is in part informed by my very, very close experience with the criminal justice system, which is an adversarial system and which is a punitive system. So it's designed to, put people in separate camps that are in opposition to each other, and then to have a contest over who's right and who's wrong, and then to punish the person who loses. And that's the whole name of the game. And it becomes, and then I see that sort of mindset, that sort of self-righteous, punitive mindset reflected in outside of the criminal justice system, because like especially when we hear about terms like accountability, like that's an idea that is grounded in this sense of justice, right? Like can we hold someone accountable for the harm that they caused to another person, intentional or otherwise? And then I sort of use my thoughts around what I have learned about the criminal justice system and how it works and how it doesn't work to also inform how I feel about this issue that ultimately comes down to what, some philosophers call the care-harm foundation. Ultimately, it all comes down to caring about people and not wanting to harm people. So how do we manifest that in the world? And I do feel like it's oversimplified the way that I look at it. And I feel like also it's both oversimplified in that it tends to be a very black and white scenario that I see people, especially the loudest people, sort of putting things out there. And to your point also that like you'll see people saying, hold yourself accountable, but once you do, we will punish you for it. So like you're not incentivizing the very thing that you are asking for. And so there's that sort of complicated thing. But that also goes back to the adversarial criminal justice system, which says, oh, if this person admits that they did something wrong, they're going to be punished for it, like instead of like we are in a system where it is not in anyone's best interest to admit that they were wrong. Like it's just not like what's in the best interest of anyone if they are navigating the criminal justice system is to force the authorities who have the right to punish you to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that they have the right to punish you and not necessarily. And furthermore, I think one sort of problem that I have with the criminal justice system is that so much emphasis on finding someone accountable and righting the wrong is on punishing the perpetrator instead of restoring the victim. And so I feel like because it's so much it's just easier to destroy than it is to uplift and to construct and to elevate. It's just an easier thing to do. It's easier to hurt someone else than it is to heal someone. And so we find, I think that there's this sort of knee-jerk impulse in society to find satisfaction in further harm than in the very hard and complicated and difficult work of healing. But at the same time, personally, as I encounter this, I like when it all comes down to it, I sort of test it on my own self and my own experiences, which are the things that I really deeply know and that I understand all of the nuances around. So to give a very concrete example of what this means for me, I go, okay, I was harmed by this crazy prosecutor guy who out of nowhere just like completely defined me as a monster and threw me in prison and tried to have me spend the rest of my life there. Like that. And then I went from being an anonymous person to one of the most hated women on the planet there for a second. What do I do about that? On one hand, if I was feeling sort of self-righteous and adversarial, I would go, fuck that guy, punish that guy. He should be held accountable. He should face consequences. Cancel him. And that's how I shall have my satisfaction. But I intuitively did not feel like that would actually satisfy the hurt that was happening to me. That was not going to uplift me. That was not going to give me what I needed to heal from the trauma that I had experienced, which was in some way undoing, like if you can ever undo some of the harm, fortunately, reputational damage is something that you can work to undo because reputation is an evolving thing. Unfortunately, like life and limb are not. So, there are certain things that you can't undo the harm. But that said, you can compensate someone for certain losses to help at least facilitate the new evolution of their life, given the sort of losses that they've incurred, right? And so when I'm thinking about like how how do I want to be an effective person in the world? I instead of focusing on what I need from that person to fix me, I ask myself, what do I need to fix me? And how is that person a part of it, if at all? And so that's the equation that I have gone through. So like for me, I don't need my prosecutor to be punished for me to feel healed and to feel like accountability has been had. Like instead, it's like, what would really help me as a victim of an injustice is to be recognized as somebody who got fucked over by the system and deserves to be compensated for the losses that I've incurred. Like that's a different way of approaching the problem. And so, but then again, like it's such a personal one, right? How do you like expand that mindset to something that is more societal than personal? And then how do you translate that societal impulse on a personal level?
How old's your daughter now?
She's 3.
If you zoomed forward in time and your experience had been your daughter's experience, how would you feel about that prosecutor?
Well, I can tell you how my mom feels about my prosecutor, fuck that guy.
Right.
But at the same time, I don't think that my mom is necessarily interested in punishing him. She is interested in me being okay.
Can I ask one more? Like, let's pretend, thought experiment, you know the drill. Like, let's pretend that you lost something. Let's do the life and limb thing. There had been a big fight in prison and you lost use of your right arm. Does your mom still not want to, when there's something you can never get back, and maybe you're like, dude, Dessa, there obviously is something I can never get back. That's the scenario we're in, my lost life, my lost time.
Yeah, I lost years of my life that I'll never get back, for sure. But you're right. Like in an ongoing sort of way, say I know I got paralyzed from the waist down because some kind of prison riot happened and I shouldn't have been there for that prison riot were it not for this guy's decision. Great question. Does punishing him make my life better? I don't think so. I think that like the thing that would make it better is anything that you can do to possibly heal from something like that. But even if you can't, then in having some kind of support system in place that would make me navigating the world with now this handicap easier and better and fulfilling as much as humanly possible. And so I think the one thing I will say, though, is that if you are in a position to harm someone else in the same way, you obviously do not want that. I think, and another thing that I think is a part of this like accountability equation, at least from, again, this like very personal angle, is this idea that like you want the person who harmed you to know that they harmed you and to know that it was wrong. And it feels like the only way that you can sort of like force that realization on someone is to like punish them. But
do you think it's possible that you are ferreting in a degree of subjectivism here? Meaning you don't want the prosecutor to be imprisoned or hurt or harmed, essentially, in a retributive way. But let's pretend you were someone who did. Does that make sense? Like, I think of, the conversations about Guantanamo right now, where you have victims who really disagree about how they would prefer that people who've harmed them be treated. You have some people saying, like, for this act, I seek the death penalty. And you have some people saying, like, you know what, my son would forgive, and so I would. So what do we do when we don't have a consensus? How do we understand how justice is best served when even the people who've been harmed disagree about what that might mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, I think prioritizing restoring the victim in whatever way possible is the most sane and largely of anything that we could all agree on. How can we restore a victim to any kind of place where they are not debilitated by the thing that happened to them? I think that is something that generally we can all agree on. Then in addition to that, that is where we enter hairy scenarios where some people might say, well, the only way that as a victim I will feel satisfied is by the punishment of the person. But that is also a subjective thing that I think we should all discuss as a society because it has societal implications. It's not just a personal thing. Like,
yeah, I agree.
Because it's a society that is then imposing a punishment on, or in some cases, death on a person. It's not like the individual human who got hurt. It is society. And unfortunately, like there are some times where, people who have been hurt want to hurt back, but that's not okay. Like,
can I ask, okay, so to like zoom in on like the care harm, let's pretend that there's a person who loses a leg from a drunk driver. That's person A. And then there's a person who loses their leg in an avalanche. That's person B. My question is, I think for both of those people, we would argue, hey, if we're going to build a society, we should do all that we can to restore those people as much as we can to fulfilling, active engagement, etc. So what distinguishes one from the other as justice versus like, hey, we're a culture of care?
Well, now we're getting into some tricky philosophical scenarios because on the one hand, the very simple response to that is that you can't hold nature accountable for a thing, but you can hold a person accountable because a person is presumably making choices and has ideas about what the right and wrong choice may be. And even if it's not, intentional, say that it was a drunk driver who, for whatever reason, like hit their car. And so they didn't intend to make someone lose their leg, but they were negligent. And so there should be some kind of consequence that would protect people from that person potentially making that same choice in the future. And some people would argue that that person needs to be punished for having made a choice that they knew could have had consequences, and they didn't take those consequences into consideration. That's one philosophical argument. The other philosophical argument is that humans are just like avalanches, in that in any given moment, the choices we make are less intentional than we like to think they are. And that the perfect set of causal, factors led up to a person making a bad decision in this moment that then resulted in the consequence that it had. And holding him accountable for that is like holding an avalanche accountable for that. I think that the one thing that is a factor, even in that scenario, is in a similar way that like the LA fires conversation is a scenario. It goes down to, did in some way we as a society make decisions that then allowed for this thing to happen? Were we not managing water correctly? Were we not supporting the public school system correctly? And this person slipped through the cracks and started, using drugs and drinking alcohol, and we didn't notice that they still had their driver's license, and here they are being an avalanche because we weren't paying attention and making the right decisions. Like, I think that I love that you brought up an avalanche of all things, because it does feel like in this other philosophical argument, it's not just the one person who's like speeding down the hill, about to head like in their car, about to hit somebody in a crossroads, and they're going to lose, the ability to walk, the innocent victim who happens to stand in their way. But like, it's everyone is part of that avalanche that's like pushing that one boulder at the forefront of it that's going to crush that car. And I have encountered that philosophical argument when I think about the person who prosecuted me. Like, is he solely accountable and responsible for the choices that he made? Because there's a lot of backstory and a lot of human beings that are a part of that backstory that informed his choices and informed his understanding of the world and informed the way that he encountered me and viewed me. Like, he is not a thing in isolation. At least I believe that. I if it's not obviously clear right now, I tend to believe that it's a mistake to think that human beings are these isolated individuals that we think we are. And so if anything, I try to think, okay, in the same way that we might say, oh, we are looking ahead and we see that there might be a danger of an avalanche due to, we know that the rainfall was this kind of way and the barrier between the rocks and the road is sort of degrading. Like maybe we should look into that and try to head off some of this damage. I think we should be similarly doing that with people and our societal institutions. And I don't know, like maybe because that's such a monumental task that it's just much easier to hold one boulder accountable in the avalanche.
Yeah, yes. I mean, God, what was that book that we were all reading when we were in our 20s? Oh, dang. The one about prisons. But yes, it's like also, and you talked earlier about like how incentives work and don't align. Right now, at least in the country that we live in, like, unfortunately, I think that there's some pretty serious fiscal incentives to keep the boulders coming one by one to disacknowledge gravity and storm condition. Like, yo, I will personally make money on the prison, industrial complex if we can keep these people in beds. That said, I think the kind of conversation we're having, like the trolleyology of like 5 people on a railroad track, I do think that helps investigate fundamental intuitions morally. And of course, most of us, when we really feel embarrassed, fucked up, angry at somebody else, indignant, ashamed, are doing so in messier waters where variables don't so like neatly cleave from one another. But so I do think that like humans are more like avalanches. There was a big nod from me. I think that we flatter ourselves imagining like absolute free will. But I admit, I think there's I don't know if I can defend that philosophically. In fact, I'm pretty sure I can't. But I know that when I fuck up, I'm not like, well, gravity and storms. I'm like, damn it, Dessa, like, come on.
Well, and that's part of your avalanche, though, right? Like, you're the kind of boulder that when you crush a squirrel on the way down, you go, fuck.
Stupid.
Like,
yeah.
Stupid. You don't like gain perverse enjoyment and now you're aiming for the next thing to crush. Like, so that's, I think, part of the equation that is so difficult to manage because human being, you don't know, and this again goes back to the criminal justice system, you don't know if punishing one person actually like really gets through to their head, like, oh no, I fucked up and I didn't realize until now, and now that I'm being punished, like I'm like accepting this and I'm changing as a person. And to another human being who committed the exact same crime, they don't go spiraling down this mindset of like, I'm a victim of my circumstances and how dare you punish me? Like, I stole that vehicle because society had already stolen so much from me, and fuck you, as soon as I get out, I'm doing worse. Like, people are fucking, like, we just don't understand people enough and to understand how their avalanche is falling.
Agreed, and yet, societally, I think there is, like, okay, you guys can talk about it, but there is an impulse. So what are you going to do? When somebody does a bad thing, what are you going to do? And even in those two circumstances that you identified there, where the exact two same people do the same thing, end up with the same sentence, and one of them was like, yo, this is hitting me really hard, warrants consideration and behavioral change. And the other one was like, F you. I think, what is the point and how are we trying to do it? Okay, so I'm going to go back. I feel like I made a half-assed attempt with the avalanche and the drunk driver to just be like, hey, care is warranted irrespective of whether or not a moral rule is broken.
Yes, agreed.
So what distinguishes restoration, which we could ask for after someone has suffered an injury, after someone has had the decline with age, like, hey, we're going to make your life livable because we're a decent society. What distinguishes that from justice? Because it feels like there is, and what does it mean to be accountable? Like that to me, I think is the question of my year, my last couple of years. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to dig into how you've been interrogating that. And just for a moment, I want to just finish my thought about it because that's a great question. And I think that I guess what I'm saying is I think that accountability matters only so far as it is a tool in restoring the victim. That's how I feel. And I think that a lot of people instead have a very different, I think I'm very unusual in that regard. I think that there are a lot of people out there who feel that justice for justice's sake is vital. And I don't really feel that way. I feel like, and I think that there's this interesting division between, does society need justice and the victim needs restoration? And is both of the, is that what's different? Is that the victim primarily needs restoration, but it's the society that needs the justice?
Oh, this is good. Okay.
Right? So then, when the society needs the justice and the victim needs the restoration, what happens when those things are moving against each other or working at cross purposes? Then it's who gets priority? That's where I think it gets super complicated. But anyway, now I'm done.
I think that's the most exciting one I've heard so far, actually. Our model that I've encountered, which is hey, there are different interests being handled in the same event that we might call justice, the serving of justice, whatever that looks like, whether that's in a court of law or whether that's you guys go sort it out outside in the back, you know what I mean? Fist fights out outside of bars. I think the idea that the victim needs one thing, society in an effort to maintain cohesion might have another interest. And I think what I'm gleaning you saying too is hey, it seems as though we are really focused on serving the need of society and much, much, much less, if at all, interested in serving the actual needs for restoration of the victim. I went into a conversation with restorative justice practice. When I first heard that, term, it was new to me after George. Did you know that term for a long time, restorative justice? Did you know?
I did not. I think I actually started learning about it around the same time as the George Floyd, but also because I've been in this, criminal justice world for a while. And I think it just happened to coincide with that same timing. Yes.
Yeah. And maybe it traveled by a million other names beforehand that I didn't know. But I remember calling a center, I first heard it from Native American circles, oh, okay, this is an idea that's practiced largely. What does that mean? So if someone's been wronged, there's a theft, there's a fight, there's a rape, community. And I remember calling, being how does it work? What are you supposed to do? Of course, this coincided with the music Me Too scene, and what does that look like? What does doing this right look like? And I remember getting some frank feedback. This is one person, but I live in New York and I can't turn that off. But yeah, I remember calling this person and asking how restorative justice works. Do you have time to explain to a non-native woman, what are you supposed to do? And they're yo, part of the reason this works is because these communities are lifelong. You don't, you're in community with a known group of people. So yeah, you have that conversation and sit down and ask what is needed in a way that's harder in the relative anonymity that's afforded by modern city living,
Right. I agree. My mom has encountered problems she used to be a middle school teacher. And of course, middle school is the, Civil War of schools. And so there's constant conflict happening. And she remembers attempting, being trained in restorative principles and trying to, employ that, institution-wide in the school system. And she found that it was really, really difficult to do. One, because the people who were employing it were not lifelong, people who understood this, this concept. And so they were just sort of we got the, the brochure on restorative justice and now we're trying to do it. But the other issue was that it wasn't you really do need a community of people who you feel accountable to. You have to feel accountable to a community for you to care about, what your community says. And otherwise, you're going to go out and find a different community. And that's why, one of the alternatives to restorative justice, especially like if we look many, many, moons ago, if there are these communities who are using restorative justice, one other, last resort was expelling a person from the community and saying, sorry, you don't get to belong to our community anymore because you're not willing to abide by our rules and you are not willing to, be held accountable for your mistakes. And so banishment is not so big of a deal anymore.
And I would kind of because I feel like that's the system that we're trying again now in other terms. So we don't have like a township to catapult you from and that you may not re-enter. So we do that with our social circles. And to me, it just feels like we've arrived at sort of this Hobbesian, like there's no wild, if there were an island large enough to host the exiles, okay. But like they will land in Denver. Do you know what I mean? They will land in Seattle and in New York. Like, you don't just reset the clock. And also the world is bigger than your town. If there's an unaddressed avalanche of a person driving down the highway, they will get somewhere else. And that...
Yeah, and I the one thing I also fear is that there are communities out there that will support you in your like pathological behavior and mindsets.
4chan,
that are
8chan.
That are doing the opposite of restorative justice, which is actually telling a perpetrator you're in the right to perpetrate and you should keep going. And we got, there's this also these psychotic, antisocial communities that mysteriously exist, and so I feel like one of those dangers is that you can find whatever community you want that will uplift whatever behavior you want.
Yeah. I think the other thing is if we were to say, let's address the non-psychotics. So not 100% of the population, but the humans, the 95%, I guess. Like, I think wearing those labels lightly, I'm stealing that phrase from philosopher Julie Galef, but like, most of us, at one point, in small ways or big ways, have been a victim, and most of us have been the asshole. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think most of us who remember being bullied might be surprised if tape was ran and there looked like someone who had a pretty good claim that when you were hurt, you hurt them.
Yeah.
And so
I think Tina Fey jokes about that, like that
what did she say?
bullied. Well, I feel like I remember her. I mean, the whole Mean Girls thing is sort of inspired by her experiences, but like the idea that she was bullied in high school, but then actually she was like, no, wait, I was the bully.
Yeah. And also how much hurt, I'm going to avoid the word harm, but how much hurt happens even in relatively fair play. Like, your lady fell out of love with you. You know what I mean? That hurts like a mother. And no one was an ass. Or they were an ass in small, manageable, quotidian ways, But try.
And not a punishable offense. Yeah.
Although one might try.
Yes.
Or write a great album. But I just mean like the knowledge that most of us play most of the positions in this game in some small ways. And so in that kind of like John Rawlsian veil of ignorance, like what would I argue for next time I'm in the wrong? That is not appetite. That's palatable to me. You know what I mean? When I'm the jerk, how to handle that. Yeah.
But how do you deal with that you as a musician? Like as you, the musician, are you feel like you are being the jerk
sometimes,
in some way? Like, yeah.
I think even like, I think participating in beauty culture. I remember when I first started, this is such a minor way, but I do think it adds up in this kind of avalanche. Like, I think when I first started, I wore oversized clothes and and boxers and would fold them over. Now, part of that is like, I didn't get this job for nothing but talent. That's part of a flex or a put on.
Yeah.
And that served me to some extent. I didn't want like my career to only be as long as like a bikini was wearable. And I find myself participating a lot more in like, maybe like all of us were like, oh, this picture and not this picture. I've become so vain. And maybe it's just easier not to be so vain at 20 because you're young and pretty cute anyway. But like the thing that I thought I was smarter than, I am now participating in. And I remember having a conversation with like a beauty, she calls herself the fat black feminist online. We'd been chatting for another podcast. And it was like me asking her, and she has a really different world, she's rocking nails and lashes and everything. And I was like, does it ever feel like posting only those photos though? Like all of us are just trying to fit in, but we're also creating those photos that then the 13-year-olds behind us have to fit into what we're doing. Like we can't just complain about traffic without acknowledging that we're in a car. And she was like, yeah, but we all got to get to work. And I was like, yeah. But I feel like my commitment to my own ideals. I also think like, those moments if somebody says an off-color joke and you're not sure how off-color, and should you say something and make the moment weird? And maybe then you stay up all night thinking, you know what? That joke was low-key racist or whatever. It just was making sure that I'm not so afraid of being not liked that I become unlikable to myself. Because I think it's degree by degree that like a moral scaffolding erodes. Yeah.
That's super interesting because you're talking about like how likable you are to your audience versus how likable you are to yourself.
Pandering.
And pandering. And it's interesting because like, why is there that huge distance between you yourself and your audience and like what potentially they like versus what you like? Why is there that huge gap potentially? Like, why don't they just like it when,
That's what I want to ask that. Why don't you just like it? No, I think.
Why don't you just like me?
Yes. Just if you just 100% of the time would like me, then that would resolve some problems. I mean, I think it has to do. Okay, so I remember a fan or a listener once being like, oh, I think I just really respect you because you don't like sell out and write just a simple pop tune. And like the record I just had written, I was like, for the record, I thought I was trying to write just I definitely tried to do that. And I guess it didn't work, but the idea, do you know what I mean? But the idea.
I'm just too existential to pull it off.
I thought I did. I thought you liked it, turns out. But I think the idea, I think starting out, it was like, I have something to say. I need a microphone. And my biggest fear is that it'll turn into, I have a microphone. I need something to say. You don't want to stay in the spotlight just because your ego digs it. You don't want to make sure that you get to, like, the whole reason was to share this idea, these songs, this, particular brand of atheism and moralism that I'm really moved by. So if I can stay in the spotlight by wearing a bikini, all is lost. That's not why I want it. If I was passionate about bikinis, but I'm not. Like, so if you give away piece by piece the heart, the passion, the meaning, because else how would you get on stage? Then you find yourself living in this like paper shell of a life where it ticks some boxes, but you're full of shit.
And is it because like the only way to be an artist is to always be an artist and always to have something to say? Like I believe that like to be a very good artist, you're right. Like you don't want to just say shit just to say shit. You should say shit because you have something to say that's worth somebody hearing. Like you want, when you're presenting your product to an audience, you want it to have some kind of value.
Yeah.
Like if you're someone who cares about your audience, that's absolutely what you want to do. You're not just shitting around and, expecting people to pay for it. But like, does that, like, I do think that artists and all people should have moments in their lives when they are being really hyper productive, and then other parts of their lives when they should be really hyper receptive.
Yes, dude.
But like, it is the economic and incentive mechanism of making art and making a living off of art sort of put you in this trap of forcing you to be constantly in a productive mode lest you lose that momentum.
Yes.
And yeah.
Yes.
So then what do you do about that?
So yes, and part of me is like, yo, be brave enough to backslide professionally to make art that's beautiful. But I think like all of us, it's very hard to let go when you have something, even if it's something like as ephemeral as like, yeah, God, I don't know, your social platforms, and in particular, however your album landed on Billboard or didn't, like, and I'm very thoroughly indie, so it's never been the case that I'm touring in a fancy like tour bus. I'm traveling in a rented van, right? But just to be clear, but I think so. The last record I put out. It was 5 years in between the full length I had most recently put out. In that time, I wrote a book and I put out an EP, and it was COVID. But one of the questions that I was fielding on the regular was, so you haven't retired? I was like, fuck this. Because the expectation, like best practices is to put out a record every 18 to 24 months. I can't make beautiful things that fast. And also, to be honest, I like writing too. So I'm devoting some of my time to that. So maybe
you have a garden. What the fuck?
Maybe
You're
I'm baking a
human
goddamn
being.
cake. And so like part of me is like, it takes discipline not to want to win the game enough, because I care more about how I'm playing it, because I want to I don't want to make timely shit. I want to make timeless shit to the extent that I'm able. And I will be less successful in my job because I want to do my job well the way that I know how. That takes discipline, because what I want is to win the game. And I think a lot of us want whatever that means. We find that progress is so like, it's just like a hit of cocaine. Even people, I think, experience that sometimes in romantic relationships. They want to get to whatever the next level is, right? That romantic escalator. We were dating and then we moved in and then we bought a thing together and then he put a ring on, Instead of saying like, where am I happy and why? We know what the next thing is supposed to be. And so I definitely have that in, even as like a wild westy industry as music. And I find a lot of times it's like, it's only the guardrails that you set up that won't maintain your integrity. So I don't know that I always do it, but I remember being like, okay, I don't think you should not be allowed to like revel in beautiful things as an artist, but I do think it can be bullshit. So if you post one pretty picture, post a busted one too. So at least there's balance, because I do think we're low-key, not low-key, I think we're high-key, like fucking up culture, particularly for women, with the amount of self-concern and appearance that we're associated with. And also, I've said this many times, but I just think like, I have been surprised as a grown-ass woman how compelling I find the like currency of a cartoon red heart that I cannot cash in for real currency at any counter. We are so surprisingly sensitive. I shouldn't say that to you. You are probably the masterclass in that. Like, we are so surprisingly sensitive on social response and the approbation and the opinions of our peers, even when we're fully formed. So when I hear about exile and ostracization, sometimes I'm like, yeah, let's really sit for a second on how overwhelmingly destructive that can be for a person. Because I think like anybody in the public, there's a guy writing me on DMs or whatever, with some pretty foul stuff. Occasionally we'll run names on shows just to make sure, like, hey, this person either seems like a total jerk or like they're really in the throe of something. There's an avalanche. And I don't want to get caught in it. So, okay, how do we run security at shows and stuff, right? Sorry. Now I'm just avalanching over myself.
Yeah, no, please, yeah.
But I think it's been really an education in how social human beings are, the way that we engage with social media, and not just for teenage types. So if I'm this sensitive to it, gosh, I can't imagine if I was 13 and 14. And I don't want to be part of the problem that I think is under-indexed. And sometimes I still am, because I want to be a successful artist. And that sucks. And that means for women, and maybe men too, and maybe everybody in between, trafficking in absolute vanity when I care most about like exactly the opposite.
Yeah, it's hard to visibly show how being invisible is like okay.
God. What do you think? I mean, how do you feel about looks and stuff in your world? Does it not really mess with you, or does it mess with you hugely? Or
Ooh, I mean, I have just really complicated feelings about appearing desirable because, in a large way, I was punished for appearing desirable. And I mean, especially when I was in, again, not to drop the, when I was in prison card, but like, especially when, like, just truthfully, especially when I was in prison, I resented that I was physically desirable to people because I recognized that people were projecting pornographic horror fantasies onto me. And I was being defined by, in a bad way, by how people were physically drawn to me. Or, something as simple as I just have blue eyes that have really pronounced limbal rings. These are the dark rings around the iris, and they can be arresting. It just draws it. It's like a target, it draws the eye. And so if I happen to be looking in a certain direction, somebody might think, oh, Amanda is just like really giving me this intense stare that is like, piercing my soul. And it's like, or I'm just looking in a direction, and so being held accountable for how other people felt about my appearance I resented that.
did you feel it in different ways from men and women? Or was it mostly just guys? Or?
I mean, I think it was most direct coming from men, but there was almost a really indirect cruelty about it coming from women. And, there was an article that I remember someone sent to me when I was going through everything, which was one female journalist who was saying, where are all the feminists who are defending this young girl who is being defined as like the worst kind of femme fatale dominatrix based upon zero evidence whatsoever? Like, are we all just sort of enjoying this spectacle of a pretty girl being torn down because one pretty girl treated us bad in high school, and we're finally sort of getting indirect satisfaction, thinking, projecting our own shit onto this like blank slate of a pretty face? Like, is that what's going on? And so I think that, but then at the same time, I recognize that one of the reasons why anyone cared to know what happened to me is in part due to the fact that they look at me and go, I want to know more about her, instead of just non-interest. And so that's also true. And I guess the thing that, like, at the end of the day, the thing that really grounds me is that in my actual reality, which is my home life with my husband and my kids, I have a very clear relationship. I have a very clear understanding of what my appearance actually means in the real world. So my husband thinks I'm hot no matter what is happening. Like, I can be dolled up. I can be a frickin' train wreck. He does not care. Like, there's that side of it. Then there's like my daughter's side of it, which is she loves to get dressed up in costumes, and she loves for me to get dressed up in costumes. And the only time that she's ever said to me, oh my gosh, Mommy, you're so pretty, is when we got dressed up in matching costumes and she did my makeup, and she's a 3-year-old. Awesome. So like, like that really, like, I think that really makes me aware of just how deeply subjective this whole question about appearance is. And so some people think I'm pretty when I don't feel pretty. Sometimes I feel pretty and people think I look horrible. I'm just going to do what I like. And if some people find that pretty, great. And if other people don't find that pretty, great. I'm not here to make everyone happy.
and I think a lot of times it just feels like I was talking to this, what's her name? Claire. I forgot your last name. She's a philosopher, but it was like, if pretty was just one way you could succeed, cool. You're into it or you're not. You know what I mean? Like, I'm also not good at reckoning. Like, I'm a really bad sense of direction. I don't need that. I got a phone. But I think a lot of times beauty is table stakes for women. It's what you have to be something else.
Well, and in a market that when your product is visible, yeah, that's just part of the equation. And if you're not beautiful, you have to be interesting.
Yes, I think if we're the case that you're not beautiful, you have to be interesting. To be honest, I think I'd have that. But okay, you're a musician. Who cares? Let's say you want to be a reporter. Why do you have to be beautiful for that? You don't.
I know. You don't.
So for me, I think the over-indexing of it is a tricky bit. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's just because we're all human pigs.
Hey, ding, ding. On that note.
You got to work with the world.
As you find it. This has been such an awesome conversation, Amanda. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having it with me. Any final thoughts before I let you go? I know we sort of meandered, but
I'm just going to text you next time I'm near Seattle to see if you might be free. Maybe listen to some 3-year-old, new sad piano jams.
Songs.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
To the kiddie pool. Up with Prosecco, get the LEDs on, need the spectacle, gotta beat the one last week. Let's get a record. If you're trying to be a go-getter, you gotta go and get it. Desperate times call for desperate pleasures. Some legitimate headlines, mostly cries for attention. The camera speeds, copy ready to read. Ought to be a good night. Well, item 3, 2, fuck man, busted on a hot 'cause it's a hurricane party. End days every other Wednesday. Live girls dance, dead men float. A hurricane party, gold dust, sex and Bacardi. DJ says don't hold back because the water won't. Looks like someone leaked the password. Too much tea to clean Earl Grey disaster. Campaign manager comes, walks it backwards, but he's the one who tipped TV. Clever bastard. Shots fired in the echo chamber. Ricochet. The other side puts kids in danger. Don't matter what they're arguing, that's what they always say. Front of the parade, girl spins a baton. Band leader conducts with the corn and the cob. The new sound gets everybody out on the lawn. Composed for French horn, cash register mob. 'Cause it's a hurricane party. End days every other Wednesday. Live girls dance, dead men float. A hurricane party, gold dust, sex and